They don't have a hotel. They don't have that stuff. These are the little guest rooms that people have, and it's full. It's packed. They had to keep going on out into a field, man. They had to keep going out into a field. She goes into labor. Her water breaks. She yells at Joseph, water broke, baby's coming. And he sees a cave, basically, right? We talked about this on Christmas, Christmas Eve we talked about it, right? Kind of correcting the different misconceptions regarding the Christmas story. But there's like a carved out cave, 3 walls essentially, and the manger's a feeding trough, right? So she goes into labor, has the baby. That wasn't a silent night at that moment. And so they wrap him and lay him down there in an animal feeding trough, right? Crazy, right? Interesting point, though. Mary accompanies Joseph. By Roman law, she didn't have to accompany him. He could have represented the family, or she would have, her dad, because she was still under her parents, right? They could have taken care of that for us. But here's the thing: she probably, it's controversial with their pregnancy, right? I guarantee there are people looking at them sideways, and she probably felt embarrassed, even though knowing this is the Lord that's working, so she probably chose to go with them just to clinging to him, that type of thing, protect me kind of type thing. So my question here too, this is something for you just to kind of reflect here. We've got the Roman government that's imposing, right? They're imposing tax. They're having control. They're a pagan culture by nature. Now there's this new thing of Caesar and almost divine right, and there's a push in all of cultures. And now you're a Jew at this time, and you're seeing that you're conquered and oppressed by this Roman government that worships false gods, and there's all kinds. There's just a mess. Your people aren't free to worship, in spirit and truth, right? And we can see some similar aspects in our culture today, right, and around the world, but even here in the United States. And there's this worship of false gods and idols and stuff like that. And so it begs the question, I think, of whose kingdom are you living for, right? Whose kingdom are you living for? Are you living for your kingdom? Are you living for the American kingdom, the American dream? Or are you going to be living for God's kingdom? Mary and Joseph heard from the Lord, were obedient to the Lord, stepped out at risk to travel there and follow God. And we're going to see this story continue to develop. They were living for God's kingdom. They believed in the Lord. They put their faith in him. So when we're talking about being as Christians now, okay, talking to brothers and sisters in the Lord here, okay, if we're called to be not of this world, then are we worldless? Are we kingdomless? No. We're called to live for his kingdom. We're called to live for him, which means deny yourself and live for him. That's going to change what you value. It's going to change how you spend your money. It's going to change what you do with your time. It's going to change how you speak to people. It's going to change your relationships. It should, if you're truly not of this world, right? Or do you embrace the worldly kingdom of entertainment and power, excess, where you're focused on what you're going to eat or what you're going to watch, what you're going to listen to, and what fun thing you're going to go do? I'm not saying living for God's kingdom isn't fun. I'm just saying, is it entertainment driven, fleshly driven, or is it spiritually driven, right? Let's continue on there into verse 8. By the way, if you have questions, I got a number there on the bottom of the screen. We'll do a Q&A at the end, answer any questions there for you. Verse 8. All right, so baby's there. They're in the countryside of the greater Bethlehem area. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were greatly afraid. So it's dark, boom, angel shows up, and all of a sudden, they're like, whoa, they were scared, right? The angel says to them, don't be afraid. Behold, I bring you good tidings, great joy, which will be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord. This will be the sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling cloths lying in a manger. And then suddenly there's this multitude with the angel. There's a multitude of a heavenly host praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, on earth peace, goodwill toward men. So there was this massive choir. All of a sudden, boom, 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 surround sound hits. And it's just like, what? What a powerful moment there. So it was when the angels had gone away from them, the shepherds, into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, well, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us. And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. So when that angel said, hey, you're going to find the babe lying in a manger, in their mind, they're going, feeding trough. Why would they plan to put a baby in a feeding trough? Like that? So that was a sign. Like, it's not normal. If you said, like, hey, you'll find a baby lying in a crib. It's like, what? Every baby lies in a crib. It's like, you're going to find a baby lying in a feeding trough in a cave. This is the Savior. It's like, that does stand out. And they're like, the closest place for that is right over here. Like, they would know. They're shepherds. Shepherds are flock. They know that's where they would have taken their flocks at some time. You know, when the storm came and they need to huddle up, or they need to grab some food or take care of an animal that was sick or something like that, they would have known exactly where that is. So they make haste. They go to the closest one, probably, I'm guessing. And so they go there, and they find baby Jesus lying in a manger. Verse 17 continues, now when they had seen him, they made widely known the saying which was told them concerning this child. All those who heard it marveled at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. So she really was treasuring them, is what that's saying. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen as it was told them. So, little side note here. So these shepherds, it says here that they were living out in the fields. I don't know if does anybody hate camping? Any people that just really don't like camping? Yeah, could you imagine? Like, that's what they do every night. Shepherdessing would not be your thing, Diane. They lived out in the field, and they lived with who? Mostly animals, livestock, in this particular case, sheep, right? Goats and sheep and all kinds of, animals that live outside all the time. They don't particularly smell well. I doubt that they wash the wool every day. So traditionally, this occupation would mean that these shepherds, or occasionally there's a shepherdess, although it was largely a male profession, just with the roughness of it, they were gone a lot, because they had to keep moving the sheep around. So they were gone a lot. They slept under the stars or in the rain, or sometimes they slept in caves, like we talked about. They didn't always smell the best, right? They themselves became kind of stinky. It's not like you had access to running water and baths and stuff like that. And because of this, though, they even had to fight off wild animals, right? So they were you can picture, like, you had to become a little rough. Like, you had to be resourceful. You need to be kind of a survivor. You need to know how to tend to sheep and take just a little bit of animal help, veterinarian, one part veterinarian, right? And fighting off wolves or coyotes or wildcats and stuff like that. Because of this, though, they were kind of odd. They were a little odd, maybe a little socially awkward at times. They didn't have a whole lot of human contact. Even if you had multiple shepherds, for the most part, you're split up to try to maintain the flock. Maybe when you break or when you set up camp, then maybe you'd link back up, but you're just talking to one person. They're a little odd, maybe. They don't smell great when they roll into town. So society just they were kind of like pushed away, right? I just think it's kind of neat that that's where God shows up. His one announcement, hey, just let you know, Jesus is born. He goes to the fringe. He doesn't go to the highest of highs, the most noblest, right? He didn't appear to Caesar Augustus. Hey, I know you're doing the census thing. Count one more. And you should make note of this one. Capital B for baby. Okay? Right? He didn't do that. He appeared to isn't that God's nature? Isn't that God's nature? Is that he goes to those fringe people, the people that have been the outcasts, and himself being one of them. He was outcast. He was not of this world, just as we are not to be not of this world. Anyway, so the angels go though, right? And so they're all excited. They're like, oh man, the angel appeared with all this good stuff's going on. And they rush into town. They're telling people about it. And people are just like, these guys are, what the world? What is Joe talking about? I know this guy. What a whack job. Angels showing up, babies in feeding troughs. What are they smoking out there in the fields? Like, what's going on here, right? So that you could see that's where they went out and did all that. They declared it, actually, and there wasn't like this huge crowd that came to see. They kind of wrote them off because there's no record of them going, let's go find out. So sometimes when you go out to evangelize, sometimes the results just don't happen there. But it is important, though. I'll say this. That's a point I want to draw to. It's important. If you're going to be not of this world, it's important just to share with others what God has done for you. All these all these shepherds were doing is just proclaiming what just happened. So many times, for us as Christians, so many times we get nervous about sharing our faith. I don't know what to say. They're going to ask me a question, I won't know the answer. I'm going to feel stupid. Or when it comes just to talking to somebody, maybe praying with them, your palms start to get sweaty and you get nervous, and then you just stall enough to where the opportunity's lost and you just go, I should have said something, I don't know. Right? That's what happened. We make it something it doesn't need to be. Just share what God's shown you. Share what He's already done. Right? If He restored your marriage, talk to people about Him restoring your marriage. If He gave you hope, talk to somebody about Him giving you hope. Right? If all you know is that He came and paid for my sin and I believe in that, then you share that. Share with others what God has done for you. That's what these shepherds did. They were uneducated people that had an experience and went and told people about that experience. Isn't that awesome? It's simple. So simple. So if you want to be not of this world, man, talk to people. Talk to people about it. All right, let's keep going. Verse 21. Thank you for paying attention. All right, so they traveled 70, 80 miles, right? They're in a cave. It's nighttime. Some weird shepherds with like a big flock of sheep showed up as you're relaying in recovery, right? That's what's going on here, right? They leave, the flocks leave. Now it's just you, a baby who's this Messiah. Can you imagine the weight of that as a parent? You're there in the cave, in the country, stars are out, and Joseph's there. You guys haven't even fully got married. Like, what are we doing? What did we do with this? What a weight, what a burden, but a lovely burden, but you could feel that, Lord, help us not to mess this up, They move into more suitable, they would have moved to more suitable accommodations after that census passed. They probably found a room. Because it says here in verse 21, when 8 days were completed for the circumcision of the child, his name was called what? There you go. The name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. Because remember, last week we talked about, the angel shows up and says, hey, by the way, you're going to call his name Jesus. Verse 22, when the days Now, when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were completed, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male who opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. And they went to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. Let's unpack this a little bit. They call this name Jesus, right? That's verse 21. Yeshua is the Hebrew, right? We say Jesus. Jesus is the Greek transliteration of it, right? So like we say Jesus, but Yeshua. By the way, Yeshua is the Hebrew word for salvation. His name will be called salvation. How much more clear do we need to make it, right? Like it's just like it's the Messiah. It's the anointed one. It is the one who is born to die and pay for sins for all time. The one that was prophesied dozens and dozens of times, and this is it. This is go time, and we're going to call his name Salvation, just in case anybody's confused by this, right? AKA Jesus in the Greek. And Joseph. Well, here's what's kind of cool about this section. Joseph and Mary were devout Jewish parents. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing obedience here, right? And they followed the law of Moses. They talked about the circumcision of the male child on day 8. That was biblical, right? We talked about the purification. The purification, so with the childbirth, you've got all the fluids and all that stuff. So Leviticus 12 talks about that, and it would be 33 days for a male, if you had a male child, and be 66 days if you had a female child. I don't know why one or the other. I don't know. But that's what they did. So that's what she's waiting, and they're observing according to the law. It just is a little snapshot on their faith. It's just a little snapshot on their obedience. Remember, God chose these two as the parents. And we're seeing that Mary was considered, she was highly favored. Remember last week we talked about that. That's how she was viewed by God, highly favored, right? She was obedient. She was humble, all those different things. Joseph too, right? Notice here too, they gave an offering. According to Scripture, the offering that particular offering, the turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, that would be the poor person's offering. Just to let you know, that's found in Leviticus 12 as well. And you'd make an offering and say, okay, Lord, it's kind of like a baby dedication. That's biblical, right? And so they dedicated the baby to the Lord, and they bring the offering in. Lord, thank you so much, da-da-da. And they brought the poor person's offering, which is also another snapshot into their life, that Jesus was not born to a king's, into royalty. He was born into poverty, essentially, a blue-collar class people, too, because remember, his dad was a carpenter, right? And so, that's just, again, it's the backdrop. And I find it interesting as Jesus is stepping in. He just came very humbly, right? Very humbly. That's part of being not of this world. Part of being not of this world. We're in the world, but not of the world, right? So we need to let go of ego, let go of the pursuit of high and lofty things, and what does the Lord have, right? So, ultimately we have one life to live, and I think we should make it count. I know we should make it count, and so whatever you were born into, the Lord's met you at this point. You're here, okay? The Lord's met you. So use that, just meaning even if it's junk in the past, even if you were born into adversity, right? The Lord has brought you out of that, or is bringing you out of that, and make that count. There's somebody that's your testimony now, and that testimony speaks of the power of God. Don't be ashamed of your past. The Lord's bringing you from that, and if He needs to deliver you from things now, well, we need to pray and talk about that and have that become part of your testimony and have that newness, a new way of thinking, a new way of feeling, new way of acting, right? But when you have those things happen, just let that shine, right? Because we don't have time to be bogged down by the past or the fears of the future. We have, like I said, we've got one life to live. We need to make it count. At the end of this day, we're done. We're done. We have an end to our lives. And Jesus lived on mission, man. And we're going to see that in these next few verses. Well, the rest of the Gospel of Luke. We're going to see it. But in these next few verses, we even see, it talks a little bit about his childhood. It's going to talk a little bit about that whole dynamic there. But let's continue on. Verse 25. And behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. He was excited, guys. This is positive. He was excited and anxious for the coming of the Messiah. He was just excited. It's like talking to somebody. They're excited. Man, that rapture could happen anytime. Jesus could come back anytime. They're just praying for it. Lord, we pray that it happened during my lifetime. Right? Just excited. But in this particular day and age, we're not there yet. It was the coming of the Messiah was the next major thing. And so he was just excited. And he had gotten a promise from the Lord. And he's like, oh, he's just excited. Right now he's getting older, right? But he's clung to that hope. So we just kind of see what kind of man this was. Verse 26. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that verse 26 is where we left off, right? So he had this promise from the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. So he's excited. He's expectant. He's excited about it. Yeah, that's it, but it's red. All right. So he came by the Spirit into the temple. And when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him according to the custom of the law, he took him up in his arms and blessed God. Picture this, by the way. You showed up to the temple, and you've got the baby, and this guy runs up and takes your baby. And he's just like, yeah, look at this, And so that's what happens here. He takes the baby in his arms, and he starts praying. He says, Lord, now you are letting your servant depart in peace, according to your word. For my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all peoples, a light to bring revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel. And Joseph and his mother marveled at those things which were spoken of him. Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, behold, this child is destined for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign which will be spoken against. Yes, a sword will pierce through your own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. So remember, for millennia, thousands of years, Israel has been looking for the Messiah. They know that he'd be born in Bethlehem. They know he'd be of the line of David, right? There's a number of prophecies. We've covered some of those, right, in these last few weeks. But they were excited about it, right? Simeon specifically had a promise direct from God that, hey, it's in your lifetime. And that time was drawing near. And he was ready. He was there in the temple, right? And they walk in. I bet you every baby that walked in, he'd be like, is that it? Is it? Wait, no, that's not it. He's just excited. Are you guys excited for the Lord? Are you excited for those things? I hope so. I hope so. Can we try to get the slides back up? How many years did he cling to that promise? How many years did he cling to that promise? Where it was just one thing, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, just 1 year after the other. If you've ever had a promise from the Lord and it's just like you're just waiting on it, like, Lord, when? That's where he was. He was faithful, though. Simeon then sees the baby. He worships. He prophesies salvation and light for revelation, right? The Gentiles, talking about how he preached to the Gentiles, right? Verse 32, that the Messiah would bring revelation to the Gentiles, not just the Jews, right? Just boom. And the glory of your people, Israel, right? So it's uniting the world in him, right? But then he prophesied here at the end. It's almost, so he was prophesying here, by the way, guys. There's a spiritual gift that he's operating in here. And then he speaks to Mary and he says, the child's destined for the fall and rising of many in Israel. And then there's like something fresh that comes onto his mind. It's like, a sword is going to pierce through your soul too. You're going to be wounded here. You're going to be wounded, Mary. Just letting you know. When was that? Can you imagine seeing your son hanging on a cross? People crying, spitting at him? She was broken. She was broken. So he talks about that, though. He prophesied, right? God moves. God moves in his creation. He'll move in your life. I encourage you to pay attention. We're talking about being not of this world. We're in the world, but we're not of the world. And so when we're in this, there's the needs of the day. There's the job to go to and the bills to pay and the friendships to maintain and the wife to love or the husband to love and respect and all those different things, all the stuff, all the to-dos that we have to do, right? The needs of the cultures and the voting for the House of Representatives, right? The Speaker of the House, right? All those different things. Yeah, there's all that stuff, but we're not of the world. I'm not saying don't get involved in those things, but I'm saying we can't let that occupy our thoughts. My point is that all the while, like Jesus is stepping into history. When we look back into history, he's stepping into time. And he's moving, though. He's moving amidst this. Look at Simeon. We're getting ready to read another one of Anna. And God is moving in these people's lives in powerful ways where they're prophesying. They're receiving revelation from the Lord, and they're speaking it forth. And they had the promises before, and they were paying attention. And he was expectant, looking who would be arriving, coming in with a baby. Let me see your baby. Let me pray over your baby. Okay, but that's not the Lord, but bless your baby too. He was excited, and he was moving, right? And church, I encourage you, pay attention to what's going on, what God's doing in your life. Kids, pay attention to what God is doing. Learn to hear the voice of God at your age. Learn to hear his voice through the word, through prayer, through just talking to him. Adults, may we grow sensitive to him. Because if we're not going to be of this world, we darn well better be of his world. Well, that means we need to listen to Dad. Do we know his voice when he speaks? Do we know that? He's moving. It's not like God's doing nothing. He cares. He loves you, right? So pay attention. Let's continue on here. Verse 36. Now there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was of great age and had lived with a husband 7 years from her virginity. And this woman was a widow of about 84 years, who did not depart from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. And coming in that instant, she gave thanks to the Lord and spoke of him to all those who looked for redemption in Israel. So Anna was this prophetess. She was a devout woman. She was praying, fasting, serving. She was very committed to the Lord, right, since her husband passed. And so she knows that the Messiah had come, and she's ready. She's paying attention. She's ready. And she starts worshiping and proclaimed his second coming. She's going around talking to people. She's excited, and she's passionate. Part of not being of this world means that we need to evangelize. That's a key word there. Tell people about the work that God has done. She's like, hey, the Messiah's here, man. You need to know. And she's running around talking to people, like rallying them up. Hey, we need to go over here now, right now. You got to come meet him. Share the gospel, guys. First off, know the gospel. We've talked about that time and time again, right? You got to know the gospel. You need to be able to share it in 30 seconds. Boom. Sin separates us from God. Jesus came to pay for sin and restore a relationship between God and man. Put your faith and trust in him, and you'll have everlasting life, right? That's the basic concepts, right? Evangelize, share with people at work, your neighbors, your family members, right? Talk with them about that. We talked earlier, too, about share your story. Share what God has done. That God gives you this. He writes a story in your hearts, too, so you can start to talk to somebody and not make it weird. Just share what God's doing. it's simple. You share other things that happen in your life that you're excited about. Like, something cool happens. You're like, hey, I was watching this show. It was really cool. Like, I was watching the game. This is an awesome play. Did you see the play? It was really, right? Share what God's doing in your life. You know what? I was praying and I was reading my word and like it was connected. Like what God was saying, this boom, it's there. It was really cool. Like we talk about the game highlights. Well, now we don't talk about life highlights, spiritual highlights, right? I got baptized. It's super cool. Whatever. Just talk about that. Maybe it's something in the message today. You share it on social media too. Like to talk and talk about those things. Yeah, we were in church. The power went out. It was so weird, you know. I probably won't share that one, but right, that's evangelize, guys. We need to have that passion, that drive with that. That's what Anna was doing. She bore witness. So all that happens. They're, again, still haven't returned home yet. Joseph and Mary got this baby. So when they performed all these things according to the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee to their own city, Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Now, after the fulfillment of this law, that was a total of 41 days. If you're adding the 8 days of circumcision, 33 days of purification. So here we are, 41 days post-birth, right? Then they finally return home to Nazareth, okay? Joseph, no doubt, probably closed the deal by marrying Mary, right? Because at that point, they were betrothed, right? If he hadn't already done it in Bethlehem, maybe. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say, okay? This is, by the way, as they went to Nazareth, so a few months later, this is when the wise men would have come. They went to, because they remember the last in Matthew chapter 2, is it? It says that the wise men came to their home and saw the young child, not the baby, but the young child. So that's when they would have come. Mary and Joseph flee to Egypt at a certain point. Herod the Great ends up dying. The family moves back to Nazareth the second time. I say all that because all of that happens between verse 40 and 41. So now, narrative-wise, chronology-wise, here we are picking back up in verse 41. So here his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the Feast of the Passover. So now that a number of years have passed now, okay? Number of years have passed. They've been faithful Jews. Jesus probably has other brothers and sisters at this point, okay? Because now he's 12. Look at verse 42. When Jesus was 12 years old, it's like, okay, 12-year lapse, right? So there's been some time, right? You guys ever wondered like what Jesus was like as a child? Or what would it be like to have the Messiah as your brother? You know? He could do no wrong, right? There's no sin in him at all. I mean, oh gosh, Mr. Goody Two-Shoes. You know, always doing, oh, Mr. Perfect. You know, it's like parents, act as a parent, you'd be like, you could always go to him and be like, so what's the truth of the matter? Because you know you're going to get it. Did they ever doubt though? I wonder. Anyway, all right, here he is. He's 12 years old. Okay, 12 years of this. He's, you know, Ethan's almost 12. It's, you know, picture him walking around. All right, probably learning some of the craft, helping his dad with, you know, sanding, right? Cutting some lumber, setting the parts and the, you know, carpentry and stuff like that. So his parents go up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast, verse 43. When they finished the days as they returned, the boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother didn't know it. But supposing him to have been in the company, they kept going. They went a day's journey, and they sought him amongst their relatives and acquaintances, you know, when they camped for the night. So when they did not find Jesus, they returned to Jerusalem seeking him. Now so it was that after 3 days of searching, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard Jesus was astonished at his understanding and his answers. So when they saw him, the parents saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father has sought you anxiously." And Jesus says to them, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" But they did not understand the statement which he spoke to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them, but his mother kept all these things in her heart. We see that same characteristic of Mary. She treasured them in her heart. She treasured them in her heart. She kept them in her heart. Mary was a praying woman, man. She was praying for her son, and how do I be the mother of God? Like that, how do I do this, raising, So she's trusting this stuff. Verse 52, it says, Jesus increased in wisdom and stature in favor with God and men. Of course, you have the humanness of Jesus. You also have the godhood of Jesus, right? So 100% God, 100% man. How does that work? You tell me. But he was a physical person in this moment, but he was also God as well. So in his humanness, his brain has to develop. So he grew in that sense in wisdom and in favor with God and men. Find my place here. Yeah. So here they go to do the Passover, right? Big event. We've talked about this when we went through the book of Mark. Passover was huge. It was the event of the year, right? And so there would be tens of thousands of people packed into this city. So it's crowded. And you would typically travel, because they didn't live in Jerusalem. They lived where? Nazareth, right? So they had a journey there. So you get all your family member together. A lot of times you would travel together for safety and for resources, and you just kind of talk. You do the walk together. Or some people are riding carts or something like that. The kids would be on the carts, and the donkeys are pulling the carts and stuff like that. And it's just the whole thing. We're going up to Passover, going up, because you always go up to Jerusalem. Fun fact. Anyway, so they're doing that, and they do the Passover thing, and then they're leaving, and it's a big old group, and it's a lot of people, and all kinds of excitement's high. And then once they set up camp, all of a sudden they realize Jesus isn't there. They freak out, of course. Could you imagine your 12-year-old son isn't with you? And by the way, that's the Messiah, and parent, mom, dad, way to go. You just lost your kid, What if something happened to him? What if something happened to him along the road? Retrace your steps. When was the last time you had him? So they go all the way back, which is a day's journey back practically, right? Scouring the city, going around for 3 days, searching. Could you imagine the panic? So when she goes like, what have you done to us? Don't you know we've been looking for you anxiously? Yeah. Freaking out is another way to say it. I remember there was one time we were at Disneyland, I think it was, and for a moment we had lost Ethan. And it was it's that feeling of, and it's just, and like everything kind of goes into a tunnel vision, right? And it's a swarm of people, and you're just like, oh my God, where do you even start, right? That's what's going on. But it was for 3 days. 3 days they're looking for Jesus, right? And they find him just chilling in the temple, like, sup? That means for like Jesus spent the night there for multiple days. He's just hanging out with the other rabbis, just kicking it, asking questions, giving answers apparently. As a 12-year-old boy, it was astonishing them, right? Jesus was always about kingdom work. Even at age 12, he was not of this world. You get that? Eventually, Jesus grew up. It says he went down with them. He ends up going with them, right? And he was subject to them. Joseph ends up probably just passing away. I don't think he just would bail on his family, but we don't know. He probably died. So with Joseph leaving the scene, now there's no man of the family. Well, Jesus was the firstborn, so that role fell to him to be the man of the family. So he would have taken over his father's business, working the trade, supporting his family, paying bills, tithing, worshiping, working late, dealing with complaints from customers, being faithful, and 1,000 other things from, his teen years into adulthood. We just picture, we picture the coming of the Messiah, right? And it's like John the Baptist, when he got baptized in the Jordan River, right? There's 1,000 other things that he was faithful with growing up and having to work that out, right? And to be a witness and be of good standing in his community and all those different things. And in all of this, Jesus humbly fulfilled his role. He subjected himself to earthly parents, which is interesting to me, right? Jesus in his humanness grew in the relationship with God, the Father, his community. He lived a life that was not of this world. And then when God steps into your life, he's now called you out of the world into his kingdom. And he says, hey, I'm not of the world. You are not of this world. John chapter 17 talks about that. And that's him addressing his disciples. We're his disciples, right? He's calling us out of that. And the way that Jesus conducted himself all through his life, not just when he went into full-time ministry, but all throughout his life, he had that mindset. It's a mindset, right, church? And it starts, at Jeremiah's age. It starts that young. It starts when you can formulate thought. Like, that's when we are to be not of this world. We should be not of this world from how we relate to our friends and within school and within sports, within community, within our family. We should be not of this world in how we parent, how we worship God, right? We should be not of this world in what we do with our things, our stewardship, the Bible calls it, or what we do with our money, right? Or what we do with our time. That's a big one, right? Like, we should be not of this world. And Jesus lived that life all the way into when he started his ministry. I mean, there's 30-something years right there where he was faithful and faithful and faithful and faithful and faithful and faithful, right? All the way to that moment. So, church, it starts now. Don't put off till tomorrow what you should be doing today. And that's living a life that is not of this world. A few key points, and then I'll take any questions that you guys might have. Purpose it in your heart. Because the rubber meets the road. It's with you. Every day is a crossroads. What am I going to do today? What am I going to do with my time? Am I going to open my Bible? Am I going to attend a church service? Am I going to go to men's group, women's group, whatever? Am I going to serve? Am I going to be looking for opportunities to talk to people when I'm out and about? Right? Live daily for God's kingdom. I would say you need to purpose it in your heart and in your mind every single day. In the morning, before your feet hit the floor, Lord, today's your day. May I hear your voice today. May I feel your leading. Lord, I'm yours. What if that was your prayer every single day? I guarantee that you're going to see something happen. You're going to see divine appointments. You're just going to be more aware. You're going to be what I call switched on, right? Too many of us are just, we get caught. Look, the to-do list for the day is always there, right? There's a million things you got to do. First and foremost, make sure that you're focused on the right things. And first and foremost, make sure you're focused on the Lord. Live daily for God's kingdom. And then keep your priorities straight throughout the day. Don't forget, right? Don't forget about your priorities. Making sure that you're praying throughout the day. That if you're getting frustrated and irritated with somebody at work, man, you need to spend some time in prayer real quick. Take a little bathroom break, pray, and come back. Whatever it is. Maybe it's your spouse that you're frustrated with. Maybe it's your kids you're frustrated with. Maybe it could be a million things. Maybe it's something you saw on social media and you're frustrated about this or that. Keep your priorities straight. Part of being out of this world is making sure you keep your priorities straight. So you start off right, keep them straight, and just remember actively, front of mind, you know what? This is not it. This is not the everything. This is not the end-all, be-all. I'm not made for this world. The reason things are hard here and frustrating here is because we live in a fallen world. That's why. This isn't home. Church, this is not home. So stop trying to make it home. It doesn't mean don't make it nice and look for nice things. But stop trying to... this is never going to be heaven until we meet Jesus face to face. Boom. That's it. Matter of fact, at some point in the future, God's going to erase everything. He's going to reset all of creation. There's going to be a new heaven, new earth. There's going to be a reset. And But that presence of the Lord, that's home. These are tents. At best, it's a tent. Doesn't mean we can't have fun and enjoy and all that stuff and the fellowship and all that. But are we living for this world, or are we living for his kingdom, right? Does that make sense? So just keep that in mind. Keep that in front of mind and learn and unpack what that is. I understand we're all in different parts where our understanding of what that is. But if you submit yourself daily to the Lord and put him first in your life, you will see change as you consistently do that. You'll also see consistent change if you don't do those things. You will become calloused to the things of the Lord. You will become deaf to his speaking. You will become blind to his moving. And you will go, where's the Lord? Where's the Lord? So may that not be you. So